They mistook my silence for submission and my thrift store sweater for poverty. Harper smirked as she shoved a call center flyer into my hand at my own engagement party, oblivious to my phone vibrating against the table. The final digital signature was complete. By tomorrow morning, when Bloomberg breaks the news, this judgmental family will realize the company her husband is desperate to partner with was just sold by me for $180 million. My name is Inez Calderon, and as I steered my 10-year-old gray sedan up the winding gravel driveway of the Sterling estate, I could already feel the familiar tightening in my chest. It was the physical manifestation of imposter syndrome, or at least, that is what they wanted me to feel, to the Sterlings. I was an anomaly, a glitch in their carefully curated algorithm of country clubs and legacy admissions. I parked my car myself, waving off the valet who looked at my Honda with a mixture of confusion and pity. I did not want him touching the steering wheel. It was not out of shame for the vehicle, but because the leather was worn where my hands had gripped it during panic attacks at 4 a.m, back when Nexus Logic was nothing but a terrifying idea and a mountain of server costs. That car had seen more grit and determination in its lifetime than this entire zip code combined. The house loomed ahead, a Georgian revival monstrosity that screamed old Chicago money. It was beautiful in a cold, museum-like way, the kind of place where you were afraid to touch the walls. I smoothed down the front of my dress. It was a simple black silk slip dress, vintage, purchased from a consignment shop. It draped perfectly, but I knew that to the trained eyes waiting inside, it would lack the requisite designer label. I took a deep breath of the humid summer air, steeling myself. Tonight was my engagement party. It was supposed to be a celebration of love, but I knew better. It was an audit. When I entered the foyer, the noise of crystal clinking against crystal and the low hum of polite, wealthy laughter washed over me. Liam was across the room, standing near the fireplace, holding a tumbler of scotch. He looked handsome in his navy suit, the kind of handsome that had disarmed me 2 years ago when we met at a coffee shop. He was safe. He was kind. Or so I had told myself. He spotted me and offered a tight, nervous smile. But he did not come over. He stayed anchored to his mother's side. Eleanor Sterling was a woman made of hairspray and passive aggression. She turned her gaze toward me, her eyes sweeping from my practical heels to my unadorned neck. There was no warmth in that look, only a calculation. To Eleanor and her husband, Richard, I was the gold digger, the stereotype, the Latina girl from the wrong side of the city who had somehow clawed her way into their son's mediocre law career. They thought Liam was the prize. They thought his salary of $140,000 a year was the pinnacle of achievement, a fortune I was desperate to access. It was almost comical. If they knew the burn rate of my servers alone, they would have fainted. Inez, you made it, a voice sliced through the air. It was Harper, Liam's older sister. She materialized beside me, holding a glass of champagne that she had no intention of offering to me. She was wearing a dress that likely cost more than my father's annual pension. Hello? Harper, I said, keeping my voice even. The house looks lovely. Harper smirked, her eyes darting around the room to ensure she had an audience. We were worried you got lost, or that your car broke down again. Did you manage to find parking, or did you leave it on the street so the neighbors do not have to look at it? The valet directed me to the side lot. I lied smoothly. I had parked around the back to spare Liam the embarrassment, a habit I was beginning to resent. Harper laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. Well, at least you are here. I was just telling Todd how quaint it is that Liam found someone so bohemian. It must be so freeing to not have a real schedule. Being a freelancer, just waking up whenever, taking little odd jobs here and there. She used the word freelancer like a slur. To Harper, my 80-hour work weeks building a logistics AI from the ground up were nothing more than little computer projects. She refused to understand what I did. To her, if you did not have a corner office in a skyscraper with your name on a brass plaque, you were unemployed. Consulting keeps me busy, I said. The standard deflection I had used for years. It was safer this way. Success, I had learned, was something you protected until it was bulletproof. I bet, Harper said, leaning in closer, her perfume overpowering. Listen, speaking of odd jobs, I actually saw something the other day and thought of you. I kept this flyer from the club. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded piece of glossy paper, pressing it into my hand. They are looking for phone operators at the front desk. It is not much, maybe $18 an hour, but it is steady, and they give you a uniform, so you do not have to worry about buying clothes. The insult was so precise, so beautifully constructed in its cruelty, that I almost admired it. She was offering me a job answering phones at her country club at my own engagement party, around us. A few of her friends giggled behind their hands. I looked down at the flyer, then back at her. Thank you, Harper. I will keep that in mind. I am just trying to help, she said, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. Liam works so hard. You know, it is a lot of pressure for a man to carry the whole financial burden. We just want to make sure he's not being weighed down. I felt a flash of heat rise up my neck, but I forced it down. I looked over at Liam again. He had seen the exchange. He had to have seen it. He was looking right at us. I waited for him to step in, to walk over and tell his sister to back off, to take my hand and lead me away. Liam took a sip of his drink and looked at the floor. The disappointment was colder than the air conditioning. It was a clarifying moment. He was not just non-confrontational, he was complicit. He was a 35-year-old man who was still terrified of disappointing his mother and sister. I walked past Harper, dropping the flyer onto a passing waiter's empty tray, as if it were a used napkin, and made my way to Liam. Hey, he said as I approached, his voice low. You look nice. Your sister just tried to hire me as a receptionist, I said quietly. In front of your cousins. Liam sighed, that exasperated exhale of a man who believes he is the one suffering. Inez, come on, do not start. She is just being protective. That is just Harper. She has a sharp sense of humor. Do not be so sensitive. Sensitive, I repeated the word, tasting the bitterness of it. She called me a burden. Liam. She did not mean it like that, he said, reaching out to touch my arm, checking to make sure his parents were not watching. They just worry. You know how traditional they are. They do not understand the whole startup thing. To them, if you do not have a W-2 form, it is not real work. Just let it go. For me, please tonight. I am supposed to be happy. For him, I had done everything for him. I had downplayed my ambitions so he would not feel threatened. I had hidden the sleepless nights and the terrifying risks so he could feel like the provider. I had let his family treat me like a charity case because I thought he was the one person who saw the real me. But looking at him now, with his pleading eyes and his weak chin, I realized he did not see me at all. He saw a mirror that reflected a stronger version of himself. My clutch vibrated against my hip. It was the phone. The burner phone, technically, the one only 3 people in the world had the number for my co-founder, my lead engineer, and Silas, the lead counsel for the acquisition deal. It was 7 p.m. in Chicago, which meant it was closing time on the West Coast. If this phone was ringing, the escrow had cleared. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. 5 years of eating instant noodles in a freezing garage. 5 years of being told that a Latina woman could not disrupt the cold chain logistics industry. 5 years of coding until my eyes bled. It all came down to this vibration. I reached into my bag, my hand trembling slightly. I needed to step outside. I needed to hear Silas say the words. Who is calling you now? Harper's voice came from behind me again. She had followed me. Do not tell me. A client who needs their printer fixed. It is important, I said, turning to walk toward the terrace doors. I have to take this. Harper was faster. With a speed fueled by 3 glasses of Chardonnay and a lifetime of entitlement, she reached out and snatched the phone from my hand. Harper, I snapped, my voice rising for the first time. Give that back. Oh, relax, she laughed. Holding the phone out of my reach like a schoolyard bully, she looked at the screen. It was just a number. No name. Unknown caller. At 7:30 on a Friday. Please, we all know who calls at this hour. She looked at the guests who had gathered around. Bill collectors. The room rippled with laughter. It is probably a final notice. Harper sneered. Does Liam know about your credit score, Inez? Or is that another little secret? She pressed the side button, rejecting the call, and tossed the phone back at me. It clattered against my chest, and I fumbled to catch it before it hit the marble floor. No phones at the party, she declared, looking triumphant. It is rude. We are here to celebrate family, not deal with your mess. I gripped the phone, my knuckles turning white. The call had been rejected. Silas would think I was busy. He would wait. But the disrespect burned through my veins like acid. I looked at Liam. He was staring into his glass, pretending to be fascinated by the ice cubes. He was letting this happen. He was letting her humiliate me because it was easier than standing up to her. I took a slow breath, channeling every ounce of discipline I had built over the last decade. I did not scream. I did not slap her. I simply nodded, a slow, dangerous movement that they mistook for submission. You are right, Harper, I said, my voice terrifyingly calm. Family is important. I slipped the phone back into my bag. I did not need to answer the call to know the truth. The deal was done. The funds were moving. The wire transfer of $180 million did not care if Harper Sterling believed in it or not. It was real. It was immutable. Good, Harper said, satisfied that she had tamed the wild animal. Now come on. Todd is telling a story about the market. She grabbed my elbow, her nails digging in slightly, and dragged me toward a circle of men standing near the bar. Todd, her husband, was holding court. Todd was a vice president at Axiom, a massive logistics conglomerate that had been trying to modernize its supply chain for a decade with little success. He was a man who failed upward, carried by his father-in-law's connections and a loud voice. So the board is freaking out, Todd was saying, gesturing with a cigar that he was not allowed to light inside. They are saying we need to pivot to AI. We need to automate, but there is nothing out there worth buying. It is all smoke and mirrors. I heard Axiom was looking at a major acquisition, one of the older men said. Todd laughed, shaking his head. We are always looking, but these startups, they are trash. They are run by kids in hoodies who think an algorithm can replace 100 years of infrastructure. We are looking at one company, some outfit called Nexus Logic. I haven't read the full dossier yet. It's sitting on my desk. But have you heard of them? My breath hitched in my throat. I stood very still. They have some interesting patents, the older man noted. Garbage, Todd scoffed. We are going to lowball them. They are bleeding cash. We know they are desperate. The CEO is probably some desperate nerd praying for a buyout so he can pay off his student loans. We are going to strip that company for parts and absorb the tech for pennies on the dollar. I told the mergers and acquisitions team, do not offer them a dime over $20 million, and that is generous. I listened to him, watching the spit fly from his mouth as he spoke about my life's work. He thought Nexus Logic was bleeding cash. He thought we were desperate. He clearly had not seen the counteroffer I had sent to his superiors 3 days ago. He did not know that while he was playing golf, his CEO was begging me to sell. He did not know that the pennies on the dollar he joked about was actually a cash offer of $180 million that his company had agreed to pay because they knew that without my code, Axiom would be obsolete in 5 years, and most deliciously, he did not know that the desperate nerd CEO he was mocking was standing 3 feet away from him, wearing a dress his wife had just called a rag. I looked at Todd. I looked at Harper, who was beaming at her husband's apparent business acumen. I looked at Liam, who was finally walking over, looking relieved that the tension had diffused. Todd is so smart, Harper whispered to me, digging the knife in one last time. Maybe if you listen, you will learn something about how real business works. A smile touched my lips. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who realizes the cage door has been left open. "I am sure I will," I said softly. My phone vibrated one more time. A text message. I didn't need to look at it to know what it said. The wire was confirmed. The money was in the offshore trust I had set up weeks ago to shield it from marital assets. I was not Inez the freelancer anymore. I was not Inez the gold digger. I was Inez Calderon, the woman who had just sold the future to the husband of the woman who hated me, and none of them had a clue. The suffocation of the room suddenly felt different. It was no longer the weight of their judgment pressing down on me. It was the heavy, breathless silence before a bomb goes off. And I was the one holding the detonator. The days following the engagement party were not filled with the romantic bliss one might expect. Instead, they were defined by the incessant buzzing of my phone, signaling my induction into a digital circle of hell known as the Sterling Ladies group chat. Harper had added me the morning after the party, a gesture she framed as a welcoming embrace but which felt more like being handcuffed to a radiator. The tone of the group was ostensibly supportive, a stream of heart emojis and inspirational quotes about family unity. However, the subtext was a rigorous, passive-aggressive curriculum designed to mold me into a subservient wife who knew her place. Harper was the primary instructor, and her syllabus focused heavily on my perceived unemployability. It started with a notification at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting in my home office, a space Liam had never seen, reviewing the final compliance documents for the merger. My screens were filled with complex logistical heat maps and non-disclosure agreements. The acquisition by Axiom was in the delicate final stages called due diligence, where one wrong move could collapse a deal worth $180 million. I was coordinating a team of 200 employees, ensuring their stock options would vest immediately upon the sale, protecting the people who had built Nexus Logic with me. Then, the chat pinged. Harper had sent a link. It was a job listing for a cashier position at a high-end organic grocery store 3 towns over. "Saw this and thought of you. Inez," Harper wrote, followed by a prayer hand emoji. "It is part-time, so it would not be too overwhelming for you. Plus, I know the manager. I could put in a good word. Liam works so hard to keep you both afloat. It would be nice for you to contribute to the grocery bill. Right?" I stared at the screen, the blue light reflecting in my eyes. The irony was so thick I could practically taste it. At that exact moment, I was authorizing a wire transfer of $50,000 to cover the legal retainers for the closing team. I was moving more money in 5 seconds than that cashier job would pay in 2 years. "Thank you, Harper," I typed back, my thumbs hovering over the glass. "I will look into it." "Just trying to help," she replied instantly. "I know it is hard to find your footing when you do not have a traditional career path. Not everyone is cut out for the corporate world, and that is okay. We just want to make sure Liam is not carrying dead weight. Marriage is a partnership. Sweetie." I set the phone down face down. The temptation to screenshot my bank balance and send it to the group was a physical ache in my chest, a burning desire to shatter their worldview. But I breathed through it. The silence was my weapon. The longer they underestimated me, the more blind they would be when the blow finally landed. Later that week, the education moved from the digital realm to the physical one. We were gathered at the Sterling estate for a Wednesday night dinner, a mandatory ritual where Eleanor Sterling served bland roast chicken and critiqued everyone's life choices. The atmosphere was stifling, the air thick with the smell of old wax candles and judgment. Todd, Harper's husband, was dominating the conversation as usual. He had loosened his tie and was swirling a glass of red wine, pontificating about the state of the global market. He loved the sound of his own voice, especially when he thought he was imparting wisdom to the less informed. "The bond market is a mess," Todd declared, stabbing a piece of potato with his fork. "The yield curve is inverting. It is a classic signal. We are looking at a recession by the 3rd quarter. I told the board at Axiom that we need to liquidate our short-term holdings, but they are hesitant. They do not have the vision." I was cutting my chicken, trying to remain invisible. but the inaccuracy of his statement grated on my nerves like sandpaper. It was a fundamental misunderstanding of the current fiscal climate, the kind of amateur analysis one gleans from reading only the headlines of financial news sites. Without thinking, I spoke. Actually, the inversion is driven by foreign demand for long-term treasuries, not necessarily domestic economic weakness, I said quietly, not looking up from my plate. If you look at the spread between the 3-month and 10-year yields, it suggests a stabilization, especially with the Federal Reserve pausing the rate hikes. Liquidation right now would trigger a massive tax event for Axiom without actually mitigating risk. The table went silent. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I looked up to find 5 pairs of eyes staring at me. Liam looked terrified. Eleanor looked confused. But Todd looked amused. Then, Harper started to laugh. It was a high, tinkling sound that signaled permission for everyone else to join in. "Oh, listen to her," Harper crowed, wiping a fake tear from her eye. "She sounds just like a CNBC anchor. Did you read that on Twitter while you were waiting for your nails to dry?" "It is cute," Todd chuckled, shaking his head condescendingly. "She is trying to participate. Good for you." "Inez, but real economics is a little more complicated than what you find on Google. You cannot just memorize a few buzzwords and think you understand how a billion-dollar conglomerate like Axiom works." "I was just saying that the data suggests," I started, but Eleanor cut me off. "Inez, dear," she said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness, "do not embarrass yourself. Todd has an MBA. He deals with these things every day. Perhaps we should stick to topics you are more familiar with. Harper, tell us about the flower arrangements for the wedding." I felt Liam's hand under the table, squeezing my knee. It was not a squeeze of support. It was a squeeze of warning. "Stop. Be quiet. Do not make waves." I picked up my wine glass and took a long sip. The wine was excellent. A vintage Bordeaux that probably cost $400 a bottle. I wondered if Todd knew that the billion-dollar conglomerate he worked for was currently leveraging 60% of its assets to afford the buyout of my company. I wondered if he knew that the buzzwords I used were the exact arguments my CFO had used to drive up the acquisition price by $20 million during our last negotiation. "You are right," I said, offering Todd a tight, closed-lip smile. "I should stick to what I know." The humiliation was a bitter pill, but I swallowed it. I let them laugh. I let them think I was a parrot mimicking intelligent speech. Because in less than 24 hours, the man sitting across from me, the man who called me cute, would be working for a subsidiary of a company that answered to me. The final act of their play came after dessert. Liam asked me to come into the study with his father, Richard. The room was lined with leather-bound books that looked like they had never been opened. Sitting at the heavy oak desk was the family lawyer, a man named Roger who had the personality of a wet napkin. On the desk sat a thick document. "Inez," Richard began, clasping his hands together, "we want to make sure both you and Liam are protected as you enter this union. We believe in transparency. This is a prenuptial agreement." Liam refused to meet my eyes. He was studying the pattern on the Persian rug. "It is standard," Liam mumbled. "Just a formality. My parents insisted." I walked over to the desk and looked down at the document. I did not need to be a lawyer to understand the intent. It was a fortress built to keep the barbarian out. "It states that all assets acquired prior to the marriage remain separate property," Roger explained, his voice monotonous. "It also stipulates that in the event of a divorce, there is a cap on spousal support, and any inheritance or future family trusts are strictly excluded from marital assets." Harper was leaning against the doorframe, smirking. She was waiting for the explosion. She was waiting for me to cry, to scream that it was unfair, to prove that I was indeed the gold digger they suspected. She expected me to fight for a slice of the sterling pie. "So, basically," I said, looking at Liam, "what is yours, and what is mine, is mine." "Ideally, yes," Liam said, finally looking at me with a mixture of guilt and defensiveness. "I mean, I have the partnership track at the firm. And there is the family trust. We just have to be realistic. Inez, I have a lot at stake. He had a lot at stake. A partnership track that paid maybe $200,000 a year, and a trust fund that trickled out a modest allowance. He thought he was protecting his kingdom from a pauper. I reached for the pen. The room froze. Richard blinked. Harper straightened up, her smirk faltering. "Do you want to read it first?" Roger asked, surprised. "I usually advise independent counsel to review." "No need," I said breezily. "I trust Liam. If he says it is fair, it is fair." I flipped to the back page. I signed my name with a flourish. Inez Calderon. I handed the pen back to Roger. "Is that all?" "Well, yes," Roger stammered, looking at the signature as if it might disappear. "If you are sure." "I am very sure," I said. I looked at Liam. He looked relieved, but also slightly confused. He had prepared a speech to defend his assets. He had armed himself for a battle that never happened. He did not understand that I had just signed the most important document of my financial life. By signing that prenup, I had legally severed Liam Sterling from any claim to the $180 million that would hit my account the next morning. He had just voluntarily, and legally, agreed that my freelance earnings were mine and mine alone. He thought he was fencing me out of his garden, not realizing he had just locked himself out of the palace. "I am tired," I said, smoothing down my dress. "I think I will head home. I have a big day tomorrow." "Going to apply for that cashier job?" Harper called out, trying to regain her footing. But her insult lacked its usual sting. She was unsettled by my compliance. "Something like that," I replied. I walked out of the study, out of the house, and into the cool night air. I sat in my car for a moment, the silence wrapping around me like a warm blanket. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my CFO. "David, the ink is dry. Transfer initiated. Deal price, $180 million, cash. Press release is scheduled to go live on the Bloomberg terminal at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. Congratulations. Boss, you did it." I looked at the house one last time. Through the window, I could see them still standing in the study, probably toasting to their victory, congratulating themselves on securing the family fortune against the invader. I put the car in gear and drove away. The engine of my old Honda hummed a steady rhythm. Tomorrow, the world would change. Tomorrow, the mask would fall. But for tonight, I let them have their silence. It was the last night of peace they would ever know. The drive back to Liam's apartment was suffocated by a silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight in the passenger seat. I stared out the window at the passing streetlights, each one a blurred streak of yellow against the dark Chicago sky. My hand was still cramping slightly from the force with which I had gripped the pen to sign the prenuptial agreement, but the pain was grounding. It was a reminder that the trap had been sprung, and the prey was not me. When we finally entered his apartment, a perfectly adequate 2-bedroom in Lincoln Park that his parents helped subsidize, the dam broke. Liam tossed his keys onto the console table with a clatter that echoed too loudly in the small hallway. He loosened his tie, not with the relief of a man coming home, but with the frustration of a man who feels he has been dragging a dead weight uphill all evening. "I hope you are happy," Liam said, turning to face me. His face was flushed, the alcohol from dinner mixing with his simmering resentment. "You barely spoke a word in the car, after everything I did to smooth things over tonight." I placed my purse on the sofa, moving slowly. "Smooth things over. Is that what you call letting your sister humiliate me for sport?" "She was not humiliating you, Inez. She was trying to help." Liam threw his hands up, pacing the small living room rug. "That is your problem. You are so defensive. You act like the world is out to get you, but you refuse to do anything to change your situation. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it is for me, sitting there while Todd talks about global markets, and you chime in with some Wikipedia fact you memorized? They laughed at you. Inez, they laughed at us." I stood still, letting his words wash over me. He thought I was embarrassed. He thought I was small. "I was correct about the yield curve," I said softly. "It does not matter if you were correct," he shouted, his voice cracking. "It matters that you looked ridiculous trying to play in the big leagues. You are 33 years old. Inez, you are driving a car that sounds like a lawnmower. You are wearing clothes that look like they came from a thrift bin. And when my family offers you a lifeline, a job, a way to actually contribute, you turn your nose up at it like you are too good to answer phones." He stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes full of a pity that hurt worse than his anger. "I defend you, Inez. I tell them you have potential. I tell them you are working on something. But 5 years. You have been working on something for 5 years. Where is the ambition? Where is the drive? I cannot keep making excuses for why my fiancé contributes nothing to our future." The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. 5 years. My mind snapped back, violently, to the winter of 2019. I was not standing in a heated apartment in Lincoln Park. I was in a retrofitted storage unit on the outskirts of the city. A metal box with no insulation. It was 2 a.m. I was wearing 3 layers of sweaters and fingerless gloves, because I could not afford to run the space heater for more than an hour at a time. The air smelled of ozone and stale coffee. I remembered the hunger. Not the metaphorical hunger for success, but the literal gnawing ache in my stomach, because I had spent my last $40 on server space instead of groceries. I lived on instant ramen and tap water for 6 months. I remembered the night the beta code crashed, wiping out 3 weeks of data. I sat on the freezing concrete floor and sobbed until my throat was raw, terrified that I had thrown my life away on a delusion. And where was Liam during that winter? He was in Aspen on a ski trip with his fraternity brothers. He was posting photos of expensive craft beers and lift tickets. He was calling me to complain that the hot tub at the resort wasn't hot enough, while I was wrapping my feet in a spare towel to keep my toes from going numb. I had never told him about the storage unit. I never told him about the hunger. I wanted to be his equal, not his charity case. I wanted to build something so magnificent that when I finally revealed it, the struggle would just be a noble backstory, not a current tragedy. I looked at Liam now, standing there in his tailored suit, lecturing me on ambition. He had never risked a single thing in his life. His safety net was woven from steel cables provided by his parents. He had no idea what ambition tasted like. It tasted like bile and cheap sodium. It tasted like blood from biting your tongue when people like Todd spat on your dreams. "I have ambition, Liam," I said, my voice dangerously steady. "More than you will ever know." "Then show it," he snapped. "Take the job Harper offered. Get a steady paycheck. Stop dreaming and start living in the real world." I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the weakness in his jawline, the fear behind his eyes. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a prop. He wanted someone who made him look successful by comparison, someone he could save, but not someone who could eclipse him. I took a step closer to him. This was it, the final test, the variable that would determine the rest of my life. "Liam," I said, holding his gaze, "I need you to answer me honestly. No deflection, just the truth." He sighed, crossing his arms. "What if I woke up tomorrow and I was exactly the same as I am today if I had no money, no prospects, no real job as you call it, would you still want to marry me? Would I be enough for you? Just as I am?" The silence that followed was deafening. It stretched for 5 seconds, then 10. Liam looked away. He shifted his weight. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Inez, that is not a fair question," he muttered. "Relationships are about partnership. They are about what we build together. You cannot ask me to carry the load forever. It is not about love. It is about sustainability. You need to change. You need to be realistic." He didn't say no. He didn't have the courage to say no. But he didn't say yes. That hesitation was the death knell. It was the sound of a heart breaking, not with a bang, but with a quiet, hollow click. "I understand," I said, and I did. I understood everything perfectly. "Good," Liam said, sounding relieved that I wasn't fighting back. "I am going to take a shower. We can talk about the budget for the wedding in the morning." Harper has some ideas about cutting costs on the flowers since we are on a tight budget. He turned and walked down the hallway to the bathroom. He didn't even wait for a response. He assumed I would be there when he came out. He assumed I would always be there. The quiet, grateful little woman waiting to be molded. I waited until I heard the shower turn on. I did not pack a bag. I did not leave a note. I simply picked up my purse. I looked around the apartment one last time, memorizing the beige walls, the generic art, the stifling mediocrity of it all. This was the life he wanted for me, a life of shrinking myself to fit into his pocket. I walked out the door and closed it softly behind me. I took the elevator down to the garage and got into my Honda. The engine sputtered as it started, a familiar, comforting sound, but I did not drive toward my apartment in the suburbs, the fake address I kept to maintain the charade. I turned onto Lakeshore Drive and headed south, toward the heart of the city. The skyline rose up before me, a glittering wall of light and steel. This was my city. My code ran the supply chains that delivered the food to these restaurants, the medicine to these hospitals. I pulled up to the service entrance of the Meridian Tower, the tallest residential building in Chicago. I did not need to buzz in. The camera recognized my license plate, a feature I had coded myself into the building's security system as a beta test 2 years ago. The gate opened. I parked the battered Honda in a private bay, right next to a dust-covered Aston Martin and a vintage Porsche 911 that I hadn't driven in 6 months. The contrast was stark, violent even. The Honda looked like an intruder in this temple of wealth. I patted its dashboard affectionately. "Thank you for your service," I whispered. I took the private elevator to the penthouse. The doors slid open, revealing a space that Liam could not even conceive of in his wildest dreams. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls looked out over the entire city. The floors were polished concrete, the furniture minimalist and Italian. It was cold, sharp, and unapologetically expensive. I walked to the climate-controlled wine wall and selected a bottle. Screaming Eagle, vintage 2010. I had bought it the day Nexus Logic signed its first major contract, saving it for a moment worthy of its price tag. I poured a glass and walked to the edge of the window, looking down at the city. Somewhere down there, in a beige apartment, Liam was stepping out of the shower, expecting to find me waiting to discuss budget flowers. He had no idea that the woman he was trying to save was currently standing 80 stories above him, drinking a $3,000 bottle of wine. I checked the time. It was 11:55 at night. My phone, the real one, the secure one, was sitting on the marble island. It lit up, then it lit up again, and again. I walked over and picked it up. Message from Jeff B. Amazon. Incredible exit. Inez, welcome to the club. Let's talk integration next week. Message from Sundar P. Google. Congratulations on the Axiom deal. A masterclass in leverage. We will be watching. Message from Tim C. Apple. Well played. The names of titans, the architects of the modern world, scrolling down my screen. They knew. The industry knew. The embargo was lifting in the inner circles before the public announcement. I took a sip of the wine. It was rich, complex, and tasted of victory. I was not Inez the freelancer. I was not Inez the failure. I was a shark swimming in the deep ocean. And tomorrow, the minnows were going to find out just how sharp my teeth really were. The clock on the wall clicked to midnight. The storm had arrived, and I was the lightning. 6 o'clock in the morning in Chicago is usually a time of quiet gray light and the distant rumble of sanitation trucks. But on this particular Friday, for me, it was the sound of a guillotine blade dropping, severing my past from my future with a clean, metallic precision. I was already awake, standing in the center of my penthouse living room, dressed in a white Alexander McQueen suit that I had kept hidden in a garment bag for 3 years. It was tailored to within a millimeter of perfection, sharp enough to cut glass. On the wall-sized screen in front of me, the Bloomberg terminal refreshed. There it was, the headline that would stop hearts in boardrooms from New York to London. Axiom Group acquires Nexus Logic in all-cash deal valued at $180 million. Mystery founder revealed. Inez Calderon named Global Chief Strategy Officer. I took a sip of my espresso. It tasted like vindication. Almost simultaneously, my tablet lit up with the Forbes homepage. They had run the exclusive we had negotiated under strict embargo. The photo took up half the screen. It was not the Inez who wore oversized sweaters to hide her exhaustion. It was Inez the predator, arms crossed, staring down the camera lens with a look that said, I knew where the bodies were buried because I had dug the graves myself. The headline screamed, The Logistics Queen Who Rejected Silicon Valley, How a Latina Coder Built an Empire in the Shadows. I set the cup down. The silence in my penthouse was absolute. But I knew that across the city, in the breakfast nook of the Sterling estate, the world was ending. I did not need to be there to see it. I knew their routine better than I knew the back of my own hand. I had spent 2 years studying it, enduring it, surviving it. I could visualize the chaos unfolding with the clarity of a 4K monitor. Right now, Todd would be sitting at the head of the table, nursing his third coffee, scrolling through his company-issued iPad. He liked to check the internal memos before he went into the office so he could pretend to have insider knowledge during the morning huddle. He would see the urgent corporate restructuring flag in his inbox. I imagined his finger tapping the screen. Casual, bored, arrogant, then the freeze. The internal memo from the CEO of Axiom would be short and brutal. It would welcome the new leadership team. It would highlight the strategic acquisition of Nexus Logic, the very company Todd had called garbage 12 hours ago, and right there, in bold font, would be the name of his new superior, the person who now had the authority to sign off on his budget, his bonus, and his continued employment, Inez Calderon. I pictured the blood draining from his face. I imagined the ceramic mug slipping from his fingers, bouncing off the table, spilling hot coffee over his expertly pressed slacks. Todd was a man who feared power, and he had just realized that for the last 2 years, he had been mocking the person who now held the leash. It is a mistake, he would stammer. He would have to say it out loud. It is a typo. It is a different Inez Calderon. Harper would be there, buttering a piece of toast, annoyed by the disruption. What are you shouting about? She would ask. The memo, Todd would gasp, his voice rising to that pitchy squeal he used when he was panicked. Axiom bought Nexus. The founder says the founder is Inez. Harper would laugh. Of course she would laugh. The idea was so preposterous to her worldview that her brain would reject it like a bad organ transplant. Don't be stupid. Todd. Inez. Our Inez. She drives a Honda. She probably applied for a janitorial job at Nexus and got confused. No, Todd would scream, shoving the iPad across the table. Look at the photo. Look at the damn photo. And then, the second wave would hit. The television in the corner of their kitchen, usually tuned to CNBC for background noise, would confirm the nightmare. I turned up the volume on my own screen. The anchor, a woman with perfect hair and a serious expression, was speaking rapidly. Breaking news in the tech sector. The mysterious unicorn Nexus Logic has finally come out of stealth mode with a massive exit. We are looking at a cash injection of $180 million. Joining us later will be the founder, Inez Calderon, a woman who has reportedly been running this logistics empire while flying completely under the radar. Analysts are calling this the most strategic acquisition of the decade. They flashed the B-roll footage. It was a clip of me walking into the Axiom headquarters earlier that morning. Flanked by 2 security guards and my legal team, I looked untouchable. In the Sterling kitchen, Harper would be staring at that TV. The toast would be forgotten. The smirk that was permanently etched onto her face would be sliding off, replaced by a slack-jawed horror. She would look at the woman on the screen, the posture, the clothes, the cold authority, and then she would remember the flyer she had shoved into my hand. She would remember the text messages sending me links to cashier jobs. She would remember telling me that Liam could not carry my dead weight. She would realize, with a sickening lurch in her stomach, that she had been trying to bully a shark while standing in a wading pool. And then there was Liam. My personal phone, the one I had left on the kitchen island, began to vibrate. It buzzed against the marble. A harsh, angry sound. I walked over and looked at the screen. Liam missed call. Liam missed call. Liam missed call. The texts started rolling in, stacking up on the lock screen faster than I could read them, but I didn't need to read them to know the progression of his emotions. First, the confusion. He would have woken up alone. He would have seen the empty space where I was supposed to be, the closet door slightly ajar. Then, he would have checked his phone. His fraternity brothers, the ones who worshipped money above all else, would be the first to break the news. Dude, did you see Bloomberg? You sandbagging son of a gun? 180 million, you are buying the drinks for the rest of our lives. Why did you tell us she was broke? You are a genius. Man, lock that down just in time. Liam would be reading these messages, his brain misfiring. Lock that down. The words would echo in his head. Then, the memory would hit him like a physical blow. The memory of the night before, the study, the heavy oak desk, the document, the prenuptial agreement. He would remember the way I signed it, fast, without reading. He would remember his own relief, his arrogance, thinking he was protecting his pathetic trust fund from me. He would realize, with a clarity that would bring him to his knees, that he had signed a legally binding document stating that he had zero claim to my assets. He had explicitly waived his right to the fortune he was now being congratulated for marrying. The buzzing of the phone grew more frantic. Liam Inez. Where are you, Liam? Pick up the phone. Liam, is this real? Why didn't you tell me, Liam, babe? Please, my parents are freaking out. Todd is hyperventilating. Call me. I watched the notifications scroll by, feeling absolutely nothing. No pity, no satisfaction, just the cold, hard efficiency of a task completed. The Inez who would have panicked at his distress. The Inez who would have rushed to explain and comfort him was dead. She had died in that cold storage unit 5 years ago, and her ghost had finally faded away last night when he hesitated to answer my question. I reached out and pressed the power button on the side of the phone. I held it down until the screen went black. That part of my life was offline. I turned away from the island and picked up my secure work phone. It was sleek, encrypted, and silent. There was only one notification on it. Meeting reminder, 080 a.m. Axiom Board of Directors. Agenda Strategic Integration and Leadership Transition. I grabbed my briefcase. It was time to go to work. The drive to the Axiom headquarters was smooth. I sat in the back of a chauffeured SUV, watching the city wake up. When we pulled up to the glass tower that dominated the financial district, there was already a small crowd of photographers gathering near the entrance. They were looking for the mystery founder, my driver, a former Navy SEAL named Marcus, whom I had hired 2 days ago. Opened the door. The flashbulbs went off immediately, a blinding staccato of white light. I did not shield my eyes. I put on my sunglasses not to hide, but to intimidate, and walked straight toward the revolving doors. Inside, the lobby was a cathedral of corporate power, marble floors, high ceilings, and the hushed atmosphere of serious money. But today, the atmosphere was different. It was charged with electricity. Employees were huddled in small groups, whispering. As I walked past the security desk, heads turned, eyes widened. I saw the recognition ripple through the crowd. These were people who, until yesterday, would have looked right through me. Now, they looked at me with a mixture of awe and terror. I swiped my new badge at the turnstile. It beeped green, authorized. Todd worked on the 14th floor. The executive boardroom was on the 50th. As the elevator ascended, my ears popped. I watched the numbers climb. 14. I imagined Todd at his desk, staring at the wall, wondering if he should start packing his box now or wait for security to escort him out. The doors opened on the 50th floor. The air up here was rarefied. The carpet was thicker. The silence was deeper. Standing at the end of the hallway, waiting for me, was the CEO of Axiom, a man named Sterling, no relation to Liam. Thank God. Just a common name in these circles, but everyone called him the Old Man. He was ruthless, brilliant, and the only person in this building I respected. Inez, he said, extending a hand. He didn't look at me like a girl. He looked at me like a fellow predator. Welcome to the other side of the table. Good morning, Arthur, I said, shaking his hand firmly. I trust the wire transfer went through smoothly. Cleared at 601, he said with a dry chuckle. You have expensive taste in timing. The board is waiting. They are very eager to meet the woman who forced us to pay 30% over market value. Quality costs extra, I said. We walked toward the double mahogany doors of the boardroom. I could hear the murmur of voices inside. These were the masters of the universe, men who controlled shipping lanes, who decided the price of grain in Africa and the availability of medicine in Asia, and I was about to walk in there and tell them how to run their business. As Arthur reached for the door handle, a thought flickered through my mind. I wondered what Harper was doing right now. Was she frantically deleting her texts? Was she trying to find a way to spin this to her friends? Oh, yes. We always knew Inez was special. We were just keeping it quiet for security reasons. It didn't matter. The truth was out, and it was written in zeros. Arthur opened the doors. The conversation inside stopped instantly. 12 men in expensive suits turned to look at me. I stepped into the room. I did not smile. I did not apologize for being late. I walked to the empty chair at the head of the table, the one to the right of the CEO, the seat reserved for the chief strategy officer. I placed my briefcase on the table and unclasped it. The sound was sharp, like a gunshot in a canyon. Gentlemen, I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room, we have a lot of work to do, and based on the quarterly reports I read last night, we are going to start by trimming the fat in middle management. I saw a few of them exchange nervous glances. They knew exactly who I was talking about. The panic at the Sterling household was just a localized fire. What I was about to do in this room was a controlled burn of the entire forest, and I was holding the match. The silence in the back of the town car was a luxury item, far more expensive than the leather seats or the chilled, sparkling water in the console. After the chaos of the morning news cycle, I had turned my personal phone back on, not to answer it, but to witness the autopsy of my former life. It was a study in human psychology, a masterclass in panic and revisionist history delivered via iMessage. I sat with my legs crossed, scrolling through the notifications with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing bacteria under a microscope. The numbers were staggering. 15 missed calls from Harper, 28 from Liam, 5 from Eleanor Sterling, a woman who had previously only called me once in 2 years to tell me I was parking in the wrong spot. The timeline of the messages was a perfect arc of grief, denial, bargaining, and finally, shameless groveling. I opened the thread with Harper first. It played out like a tragicomedy in 4 acts. 8:03 in the morning. Harper. What the hell is going on? Inez Todd is screaming at the TV. Is that you on Bloomberg? Pick up the phone. 8:15 in the morning. Harper. This has to be a mistake. Todd says it is a mix-up with the names. You need to clear this up before you embarrass Liam further. People are texting me. 8:45 in the morning. Harper Inez. Answer me. Is it true? Did you really sell that little computer thing for that much money? Todd is saying it is cash. Call me right now. And then, the pivot. The moment the reality set in that the freelancer she mocked could now buy her entire existence and turn it into a parking lot. 9:10 in the morning. Harper OMG sweetie. I just watched the full segment. I'm screaming. I literally just told the girls at the club. I knew she was a genius. I am so proud of you. We need to celebrate. Champagne is on me. Call your favorite sister-in-law back. Love you. I let out a short, dry laugh. Favorite sister-in-law. 12 hours ago. I was a burden. Now, I was sweetie. The speed at which her moral compass spun to align with the magnetic north of money was almost impressive. Then, there was Liam. His thread was less funny and more pathetic. It was a frantic drumbeat of a man realizing he had fumbled the winning lottery ticket right before the drawing. Liam babe, where did you go, Liam? I saw the news. I can't breathe. Why didn't you tell me, Liam? I'm so sorry about last night. I was stressed. You know I didn't mean it. Liam, I love you. I have always loved you. Money doesn't change us. Liam, I am coming to the Axiom office. We need to talk. Please don't shut me out. Liam Inez, please, I am scared. The word scared stood out. He wasn't scared of losing me. He was scared of the world finding out he had lost me. He was scared of the narrative shifting from Liam the savior to Liam the fool. I locked the phone and slid it into my purse. The car was slowing down. We were pulling up to the main entrance of the Axiom Global headquarters. The glass facade of the building reflected the morning sun, looking like a fortress of capitalism. There is a bit of a crowd, Ms. Calderon. My driver, Marcus, said, glancing in the rearview mirror, and there appears to be an employee waiting by the curb who is refusing to move for security. I looked out the tinted window. There he was, Todd. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His tie was loosened, and he looked like he had run down 14 flights of stairs. He was pacing back and forth near the revolving doors, scanning every black car that approached. He looked smaller than I remembered. The bluster, the cigar-chomping arrogance of the previous night had evaporated, leaving behind a sweaty, terrified middle manager. Ignore him, I said. Pull up to the VIP entrance. Understood. The car glided past the main entrance. I saw Todd's head snap toward us. He recognized the car, or perhaps he just recognized the aura of importance. He started to jog alongside the vehicle, waving his arms. Inez, Inez. I could see his mouth moving, though the soundproof glass reduced his desperate shouts to a silent mime show. He looked ridiculous, like a man trying to flag down a rescue helicopter that had already decided to leave him on the island. The car stopped at the private entrance reserved for C-suite executives and board members. Security was already there. Holding the door open, I stepped out onto the pavement. The air was crisp. Inez. Wait. Todd had sprinted around the planters. He was breathless, his face red. 2 security guards immediately stepped in his path, blocking him with the efficiency of a brick wall. Ms. Calderon. Todd gasped, trying to peer around the shoulder of a guard who was a foot taller than him. It is me, Todd Harper's husband. We need to talk. Just for a second. I paused. I didn't turn my body toward him. I just turned my head, adjusting my sunglasses. I looked at him with the vague recognition one gives to a waiter who brought the wrong order 3 weeks ago. I am late for a board meeting, I said, my voice cool and carried by the wind. I know I work here. Todd smiled, a frantic, teeth-baring grimace. I can walk up with you. I can brief you on the logistics division. I have some great ideas. Inez, I told everyone this morning. I said, Inez is family. She knows what she is doing. Family, I repeated the word. It hung in the air, heavy with the memory of his laughter at the dinner table. That is an interesting word. Todd, is that what we were last night when you called my company garbage? Todd went pale. I was joking. You know that. It was just locker room talk, Inez. Please, I have a mortgage. Harper, she's going to kill me if... I don't have time for low-level personnel issues. I cut him off. I turned to the head of security. I believe this employee is out of his designated zone. Please ensure he returns to his cubicle. We wouldn't want his productivity metrics to suffer. Yes, ma'am, the guard said. Inez. You can't do this, Todd shouted as the guard firmly gripped his arm. I am a vice president. Not for long if you are not at your desk, I murmured to myself. I walked through the glass doors and into the private elevator. The doors slid shut, cutting off the sight of Todd arguing with the security team. As the lift accelerated upward, I felt a lightness in my chest that had nothing to do with gravity. I had spent years being invisible to these people. Now, I was the only thing they could see, and the view was terrifying them. The boardroom on the 50th floor was a different battlefield. Here, the enemies were smarter and better dressed. I walked in, and the atmosphere shifted. The acquisition team, the legal counsel, and the existing Axiom executives were already seated. Papers were shuffled, throats were cleared, I took my seat. The agenda was simple integration, but in corporate speak, integration usually meant layoffs. Let us look at the redundancy in the engineering sector. The chief financial officer, a man named Henderson, started. He had a spreadsheet projected on the wall. Nexus Logic brings 200 engineers. We already have a team of 300. We can probably cut 40% of the Nexus staff and migrate the code maintenance to our offshore team. This was the moment. This was why I had fought for a board seat. No, I said. The word was quiet, but absolute. Henderson blinked. Excuse me. You are acquiring Nexus for the proprietary AI architecture, I said, leaning forward. That code is not a static object. It is a living organism. It learns. It adapts. And the only people who understand its language are the 200 engineers you just suggested firing. If you hand it over to your legacy team, a team that hasn't shipped a major update in 4 years, the system will degrade within 6 months. You will have paid $180 million for a paperweight. But the cost synergy, Henderson tried to argue. The synergy comes from revenue growth, not cost cutting, I countered. My team stays, all of them, with a 10% retention bonus locked in for 2 years. That is non-negotiable. It is in the purchase agreement addendum I sent over at midnight. I looked at Arthur, the CEO. He was watching me with a hint of a smile. He liked fighters. She is right, Arthur said. We bought the brain. Henderson. You don't lobotomize the brain the day you transplant it. The Nexus team stays. I nodded my thanks to Arthur and then turned my gaze back to the room. However, I continued, I do agree that we have redundancy, but it is not in engineering, it is in middle management. Specifically, the Legacy Logistics Oversight Division. This was the division Todd worked in. It was a bloated layer of bureaucracy that I had hated even as an outsider. They were the ones who sent emails about circling back while the supply chain was on fire. I have reviewed the efficiency reports for the Midwest branch. I lied. I hadn't reviewed them, but I knew the type. There is a culture of stagnation, vice presidents who spend more time on golf courses than in warehouses, managers who rely on intuition rather than data. I tapped my pen on the mahogany table. I am proposing a cultural optimization audit, I said, using the deadliest phrase in the corporate dictionary. I want a full review of every vice president and director in the Chicago office. We need to assess their technical literacy. If they cannot explain how our new AI integration works by the end of the month, they are out. We are a tech company now. We cannot have leadership that calls our product, what was the phrase, smoke and mirrors. A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the room. An audit, Henderson noted, writing it down. That seems vigorous. Do you have a specific department in mind to start with? Yes, I said, my eyes cold and steady. Let us start with domestic supply chain management. I feel there is a significant misalignment of values there. Arthur nodded. Approved. Inez, you lead the review. You know what we need. Oh, I do, I said. I know exactly what we need. I checked my watch. It was 11 in the morning. I had saved 200 jobs and put a target on the back of the man who had mocked me in my own home. My phone buzzed again on the table. It was a text from Harper. Harper, okay. Inez, you made your point. We are family. Can we please just talk? Liam is crying. I flipped the phone face down. I wasn't done yet. The boardroom was just the warm-up. The real dismantling of the Sterling ego was just beginning, and unlike their passive-aggressive insults, my actions would be documented in triplicate and signed by HR. The clock on the wall of my new office displayed the time as 2 in the afternoon. It was a sleek, minimalist digital display that seemed to count down the seconds of my enemy's relevance rather than just marking the passage of the day. The office itself was a testament to the shift in my reality. Located on the 55th floor, it offered a panoramic view of Lake Michigan that was so expansive it felt like I was floating above the water. The furniture was all glass and chrome, chosen not for comfort, but for the projection of absolute, sterile power. My assistant, a sharp young woman named Sarah, whom I had brought over from Nexus Logic, tapped on the open glass door. She looked amused. "Ms. Calderon?" Sarah said, her voice low. "Security is on the line. There is a gentleman in the lobby causing a disturbance. He is waving around an old visitor badge from 6 months ago, claiming he has clearance." I didn't need to ask who it was. Liam had a habit of keeping souvenirs from moments he felt were significant to his ego. That visitor badge was from the one time I had brought him to the lobby of the old Nexus building to pick up a package. He had kept it, likely believing it gave him some sort of proprietary claim over my work. "It is Liam Sterling," I said, not looking up from the merger documents I was annotating. "He says he is your fiancé," Sarah continued, watching me closely for a reaction. "He is demanding to see you. Security is ready to remove him, but since you are the chief strategy officer, they wanted to confirm with you first." I paused. I could have him thrown out. It would be easy. It would be satisfying to watch him being dragged out by the same guards who had stopped Todd earlier, but that would be messy. It would give him a story to tell, a narrative where he was the martyr denied a chance to speak. "Let him up," I said, finally capping my pen. "But tell security to escort him to the door, and Sarah stay in the room. I want a witness." "Understood." 5 minutes later, the elevator doors down the hall chimed. I stayed seated behind my massive desk, a deliberate power move. I wanted him to walk the long distance from the door to my desk. I wanted him to take in the army of analysts working in the glass-walled conference room next door. I wanted him to see the 2 junior lawyers who were currently sitting on my sofa, reviewing intellectual property filings. Liam burst in, or at least, he tried to. The heavy glass door was pushed open by a security guard, and Liam stepped through, looking like a man who had been running against the wind. His suit was rumpled. His hair, usually gelled to perfection, was disarrayed. He looked frantic, sweaty, and small. He stopped 3 feet into the room. He looked at the view. He looked at the lawyers, who barely glanced up at him before returning to their work. He looked at Sarah, who was standing by the wall with her tablet, ready to take notes. And then, finally, he looked at me. I did not stand up. I did not smile. I sat with my hands clasped on the desk, the picture of a CEO waiting for a subordinate to explain a missed deadline. "Inez," Liam breathed out. The name sounded foreign in this room. He took a step forward, then stopped as if hitting an invisible wall. "My God, this place. Is this all yours?" "It is the office assigned to the chief strategy officer," I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. "You have 5 minutes. Liam, I have an integration meeting at 2:15. The coldness of my tone seemed to snap him out of his awe. His face shifted, contorting into a mask of hurt and indignation. He walked closer, placing his hands on the edge of my desk, leaning in. 5 minutes, he asked, his voice shaking. "We are engaged. Inez, we are supposed to be getting married in 3 months, and you give me 5 minutes after you humiliated me." "I humiliated you?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. I was under the impression that Bloomberg broke the news. Not me. I haven't said a word to the press about you. You know what I mean. Liam slammed his hand on the desk. The lawyers on the sofa stopped reading and looked up. The security guard at the door took a step forward, but I held up a hand to stop him. "You let me believe you were nothing," Liam hissed, lowering his voice but increasing the intensity. "You let my family mock you. You let me lecture you about money. You let me buy you dinner with my parents' credit card while you were sitting on a fortune. Why to make me look like a fool? Was it a game to you?" "It wasn't a game, Liam," I replied calmly. "It was a test, and you failed." "A test." He laughed, a bitter, incredulous sound. "You don't test the people you love, Inez. You trust them. You lied to me. Omission is a lie. You made me think you were struggling." "I didn't make you think anything," I corrected him. "I told you I was working. I told you I was building something. You chose to interpret that as unemployed. You chose to see my silence as failure. Because it made you feel superior. You needed me to be small so you could feel big. I simply didn't correct your assumption because I wanted to see how you treated me when you thought I had nothing to offer you but myself." Liam recoiled as if I had slapped him. He stood up straight, running a hand through his hair. He walked a small circle in front of the desk, trying to regroup. He realized the victim angle wasn't landing because the logic was too sound. He couldn't argue with the fact that he had judged me based on appearances. He stopped and looked at me, his eyes softening. He decided to play the only other card he had: the emotional history. "Okay," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Okay, I was an idiot. I admit it. My family can be a lot, and I got caught up in it. But Inez, look at us. Look at what we have. We have been together for 2 years. You cannot just throw that away because I made a mistake. I love you. I loved you when I thought you were broke, didn't I? I stayed with you. You stayed with me," I repeated. "But you didn't respect me. And last night, when I asked if you would marry me if I had nothing, you couldn't answer. That wasn't a mistake, Liam. That was the truth." "I was stressed," he pleaded. "I was trying to be practical, but none of that matters now. We are here. You are successful. I am so proud of you. We can build an empire together. Think about it. You have the capital. I have the legal connections. We are a power couple. Inez, this changes everything." I watched him pivot. It was fascinating and disgusting. In the span of 30 seconds, he had gone from accuser to partner. He was already mentally spending the money. He was imagining the galas, the new house, the way his friends would look at him. "It changes nothing for you." "Liam," I said. He blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean that there is no we in this equation," I said. "And there is certainly no empire that involves you." Liam's face hardened. The desperation was turning into something uglier: greed. "You can't just cut me out," he said, his voice taking on a litigious edge. "We are engaged. In the eyes of the law, there is an expectation of shared future assets. And frankly, Inez, if you want to play hardball, I could argue that you entered into our engagement under false pretenses. You hid material assets. That is fraud." I almost laughed. It was so predictable. He was a mediocre lawyer, and he was making a mediocre legal threat. "False pretenses?" I asked. "Interesting theory." "It is not a theory," Liam said, gaining confidence. "We have a contract, an agreement to marry, and we have a prenuptial agreement that we signed, a contract that assumes full disclosure." "Ah, yes," I said, opening the top drawer of my desk. "The prenup." I pulled out a photocopy of the document we had signed the night before. I had made a copy immediately after signing it and sent the digital file to my lawyer before I even left his parents' house. I placed it on the desk and slid it toward him. "I am glad you brought this up," I said, "because my legal team tells me it is ironclad. It was drafted by Roger Blackwood. Wasn't it your family's shark?" "He is very good. Expensive, but good." Liam looked at the document, confused. "Yeah, so it proves we have a legal binding." "Read Clause 4, Section B," I said, pointing to the paragraph with my pen. "The one your father insisted on. The one meant to protect your trust fund from the gold digger." Liam looked down. He squinted at the legalese. "It says," I recited the words from memory, "that any and all assets acquired, created, or liquidated by either party, whether prior to the marriage or during the engagement period, shall remain the sole and separate property of the originating party. Furthermore, both parties explicitly waive any claim to the appreciation value of said separate property." I leaned back in my chair. "You see, Liam, when I signed this last night, the deal with Axiom was already in escrow, but the transfer of funds, the actual liquidation event, happened at 6 this morning, technically, during our engagement period." Liam's face went gray. He understood what I was saying. "You signed a document," I continued, "drafted by your own lawyer, that explicitly states you have no right to my company, my stock, or the $180 million in cash that hit my account today. You built a wall to keep me out of your tiny trust fund, Liam, and in doing so, you walled yourself out of my fortune." He stared at the paper. His hands were shaking. He realized the magnitude of his error. He had been so afraid I would take his crumbs that he had signed away his right to the feast. "You knew," he whispered. "You knew when you signed it." "Of course I knew," I said cold. "I read fast, and unlike you, I don't sign things I don't understand." "This is entrapment," he stammered, grasping for words. "It is contract law," I said, "and if you try to challenge it, I will bury you in litigation so deep you will need a submarine to find sunlight. My legal budget for the next fiscal year is larger than your firm's entire revenue." Liam looked at me one last time. The arrogance was gone. The love was gone. Even the greed was gone, replaced by the hollow, crushing realization of total defeat. He looked at the luxury around me, the staff who were pretending not to listen but hearing every word, and he realized he didn't belong here. He never had. I checked the time on my desktop monitor. "You have overstayed your 5 minutes," I said. "Sarah, please show Mr. Sterling out, and notify the lobby that his visitor pass is permanently revoked." "Inez," he started, his voice cracking. "Goodbye, Liam," I said, turning my attention back to the documents on my desk. "I have a company to run, and I believe you have a job to find. I heard your firm frowns on associates who generate negative publicity." I didn't watch him leave. I heard his footsteps, heavy and slow, retreating across the plush carpet. I heard the glass door open and close. When the click of the latch echoed through the room, I didn't feel a tear. I didn't feel a pang of loss. I felt the pure, unadulterated efficiency of a problem solved. "Sarah," I called out without looking up. "Yes, Ms. Calderon." "Get me the file on the charitable trust structure, and bring me a coffee. Black. Right away." The door closed. The room was quiet again, save for the hum of the servers and the distant sound of the city below. I picked up my pen and slashed a line through a paragraph of the merger agreement. It was time to get back to work. I would never have returned to the Sterling estate of my own volition. The house, with its imposing columns and manicured hedges, stood as a monument to a chapter of my life I had already mentally incinerated. However, Richard Sterling was a man who understood leverage, even if he did not understand respect. He had called Arthur, the CEO of Axiom, and framed this dinner as a necessary family summit to ensure that personal dynamics would not interfere with the upcoming corporate integration. Arthur, a pragmatist to his core, had looked at me over his rimless glasses and suggested I attend. "Go," he had said. "Let them say their piece. Close the loop. Then bury them." So, 3 days after the announcement, I found myself once again steering a car up that gravel driveway. But this time, I was not in my battered Honda. I was in the back of an armored black SUV provided by the company, driven by Marcus. I did not park in the side lot. Marcus stopped the vehicle right at the front portico, blocking the stairs, a silent assertion of dominance. When I stepped out, the front door opened before I even reached the threshold. It wasn't the housekeeper, it was Eleanor Sterling. "Inez," she exclaimed, her arms spread wide as if greeting a returning war hero. She was wearing a silk caftan that likely cost $3,000, and her smile was so bright it looked painful. "We are so glad you could make it. Come in, come in. The air is getting chilly." I walked past her, my heels clicking on the marble foyer. The air inside smelled of expensive lilies and desperation. "Hello, Eleanor," I said, keeping my hands firmly at my sides, denying her the hug she was angling for. "Please, go through to the dining room," she fluttered, ignoring the snub. "Everyone is waiting. We opened a special bottle just for you." The dining room had been transformed. Gone was the casual, judgmental atmosphere of the Wednesday night dinners. The table was set with the royal china, the gold-rimmed plates that Eleanor usually kept locked in a display cabinet, claiming they were too fragile for common use. The lighting was dimmed to a flattering amber glow. Liam was standing by his chair, looking like a man attending his own sentencing hearing. He wore a suit that seemed slightly too large for him now, as if his ego had shrunk and taken his physical mass with it. Richard stood at the head of the table, beaming with a paternal pride that was entirely fabricated. And then there was Harper. The transformation was almost grotesque. Harper, who usually dressed in loud prints and plunging necklines to draw attention, was wearing a high-necked navy blue dress that looked like something a governess would wear in a Victorian novel. She had removed her flashy jewelry. Her makeup was muted. She looked like she was trying to disappear. "Inez," Richard boomed, gesturing to the seat at his right hand, the seat of honor, the seat usually reserved for his most important business associates. "Please, sit. We are family here." I sat. I placed my clutch on the table, right next to the gold-rimmed plate. "Thank you, Richard," I said. Harper immediately moved to my side. She picked up a decanter of heavy red wine. Her hands, usually so steady when she was pointing a finger of accusation, were trembling slightly. "Can I pour you a glass, Inez?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "It is a screaming eagle. Todd said it is your favorite." I looked at her. I looked at the bottle. They had bought the same wine I had drunk alone in my penthouse the night I left Liam. They had done their research. They were trying to mirror my taste back to me, hoping to find a reflection they could manipulate. "Water is fine," I said. Harper froze. The rejection of the wine was a rejection of the peace offering. She swallowed hard, nodded, and poured sparkling water into my crystal goblet with the diligence of a servant. "So," Richard began as the first course was served truffle risotto with gold leaf, a dish so pretentiously expensive it bordered on parody. "It has been quite a week for you, Inez. Quite a week indeed. We have been fielding calls non-stop. Everyone wants to know the secret behind your success." "There is no secret, Richard," I said, picking up my fork. "Just 5 years of work that no one at this table bothered to ask about." The silence that followed was thick. Richard cleared his throat. Now, he said, forcing a chuckle. "Let us not dwell on the past. We admit, we were skeptical. But you have to understand our position. We are a family that values tradition. We are protective, perhaps too protective at times." Eleanor leaned forward. She reached under the table and pulled out a velvet box. It was navy blue, worn at the corners. I recognized it immediately. It was the box containing the sterling emeralds, a necklace that had belonged to Richard's great-grandmother. I remembered a conversation from 6 months ago. I had admired a photo of it in the hallway, and Eleanor had told me, with a cold smile, that the necklace was entailed to the bloodline and would only ever be worn by a woman who brought significant standing to the family. She opened the box. The emeralds glittered in the candlelight, heavy and green and ancient. "Inez," Eleanor said, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "I was looking through the vault today, and I realized something. This necklace represents strength. It represents endurance. And looking at you now, I realize there is no one more suited to wear it." She pushed the box across the tablecloth toward me. "I want you to have it," she said, "as a welcome gift, properly this time, to show you that we consider you a true sterling." I looked at the necklace. It was worth perhaps $50,000. To the old Inez, it would have been a fortune. To the current Inez, it was a rounding error on my daily interest accrual. But more than that, it was a bribe. It was a collar. "That is a lovely gesture, Eleanor," I said, not touching the box. "Here, let me put it on you," Harper offered, eager to be useful. "No," I said. The word was sharp enough to cut the tension. "I cannot accept it," Eleanor's smile faltered. "But why not?" "It is a family heirloom." "Exactly," I said, meeting her eyes. "And as you told me very clearly last Christmas, it is for women of significant standing who enhance the family reputation. I believe my reputation is doing quite well on its own. I do not need your emeralds to validate my worth. Besides, green does not really go with my suit." I pushed the box back toward her with one finger. Eleanor looked as if I had slapped her. She pulled the box back. snapping it shut with a loud click. "We are just trying to apologize." Liam spoke up for the first time. He sounded tired. "Why do you have to be so difficult? Mom is trying to be nice." "Niceness that is conditional on my bank balance is not niceness." "Liam," I said, "it is a transaction." Richard intervened. Sensing he was losing control of the narrative, he put down his fork and clasped his hands, adopting his boardroom negotiator persona. "Inez, look," he said, leaning in. "We know we were hard on you. We know we pushed you, but have you ever stopped to think that maybe that was the point?" I tilted my head. "Do enlighten me, Richard." "We saw potential in you," he lied. He lied so smoothly it was almost art. "But we also saw that you were soft. You were a dreamer, the world of high finance, the world you are entering now. It is a shark tank. We knew that if we made it too easy for you, you would never develop the grit you needed to succeed. The criticism, the pressure. It was a crucible. Inez. We were forging you." I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. He was trying to take credit for my success by claiming his family's abuse was a strategic training program. "So," I said slowly, "Harper sending me job listings for cashier positions was executive coaching." Harper let out a sob. It was a strangled, wet sound. She dabbed at her eyes with a linen napkin. "I didn't know," she wailed. "Inez, you have to believe me. I was terrified for you. I thought you were being scammed by some internet thing. I thought you were going to end up in debt and drag Liam down with you. I was trying to protect my brother, and I was trying to protect you from failure. I know I was harsh, but I did it out of love. I just wanted you to have a safety net." She looked at me with tear-filled eyes, begging me to buy the script. I wasn't a bully. Her eyes said, I was a concerned sister. "A safety net," I repeated. "Is that what you call telling your friends I was a loser?" "I never said that." Harper lied. "I have the screenshots." "Harper," I said calmly. "My security team did a full audit of my digital footprint and mentions. I have group chats from people I have never even met. Forwarding your messages. Do not insult my intelligence." Harper shut her mouth. She shrank back into her chair, looking at Todd for help. Todd cleared his throat. He had been eating his risotto quickly, as if he feared I would take the plate away. He wiped his mouth. "Listen, Inez," Todd said, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "The girls get emotional. Family stuff is messy, but business is logical, and that is where you and I connect, right?" He forced a smile. It was the smile of a man standing on a trapdoor. "I saw the memo about the audit," Todd continued. "The cultural optimization thing. Brilliant move. Really shakes up the dead wood. But I wanted to make sure, I wanted to ensure we are on the same page. I have been at Axiom for 10 years. I know where the bodies are buried. I can be an asset to you. Inez, I can be your eyes and ears on the ground." He leaned closer. "I heard the VP of North American Operations is retiring next year," Todd said. "If I had a strong recommendation from the new Chief Strategy Officer, I could really help implement your vision. I could keep the Sterling name strong within the company, for us, for the family." I looked at Todd. He was asking for a promotion. After calling my company garbage, after mocking me to his peers, he was asking me to hand him a career ladder. I took a sip of water. I let the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. "Todd," I said softly, "do you remember the night of the engagement party? You said Nexus Logic was smoke and mirrors. You said we were desperate." "I was misinformed," Todd said quickly. "I didn't have the full data." "A good executive verifies his data before he speaks," I said, "and a good executive does not rely on nepotism to save him from performance reviews." "I am not asking for a handout," Todd insisted, sweating now. "I am asking for a chance." "You have a chance," I said. "You have the same chance as every other employee in the Chicago office. You will undergo the competency audit. You will take the technical literacy exam. If you pass, you keep your job. If you fail, the market is tough right now." "But I am family," Todd blurted out. You cannot fire family. I am not firing family, I said. I am optimizing a subsidiary. And based on the preliminary reports I read this afternoon, your department is operating at 60% efficiency. You spend 4 hours a week on client calls and 12 hours a week at the country club. Todd's jaw dropped. How do you know that? I own the company. Todd, I said, I own the servers your calendar is hosted on. I own the GPS data on your company car. I know everything. The color drained from his face completely. He looked at Richard, but Richard was looking at his plate. The patriarch realized he could not protect his son-in-law from a woman who owned the infrastructure of their lives. I looked around the table. The food was cold. The wine was untouched. The emeralds were back in their box. The attempt at manipulation had failed spectacularly. They had tried to absorb me back into the fold, to neutralize me with guilt and gifts. But they had found that I was too big to be swallowed. I placed my napkin on the table. I did not fold it. I just dropped it. This has been educational, I said, standing up. You are leaving, Eleanor asked, her voice shrill. We haven't had the main course. I am not hungry, I said. And frankly, the air in here is stifling. I picked up my clutch. Why did you come? Liam asked quietly. He was still sitting, staring at his hands. If you hate us this much, why did you come? I don't hate you, Liam, I said. Hate implies you have power over me. Hate implies passion. I came because Arthur asked me to. He wanted to make sure that our personal history wouldn't be a distraction. I looked at each of them in turn. Richard, the failed manipulator. Eleanor, the rejected queen. Harper, the exposed bully. Todd, the incompetent sycophant. And Liam, the coward. I came to tell you that there is no reconciliation, I said. There is no us. There is no family. I am your employer's employer. I am a shareholder. I am a line item on your balance sheets that you cannot erase. But I am not your daughter. I am not your sister. And I am certainly not your wife. I walked toward the door. The performance was good, I called back over my shoulder. The food, the dress, the tears. It was very theatrical. But next time, save the money on the truffles. You are going to need it for the lawyers. I walked out of the dining room, leaving them in the amber gloom of their expensive, empty house. When the heavy front door closed behind me, I took a deep breath of the night air. It tasted of rain and freedom. Marcus opened the door of the SUV. Where to, Ms. Calderon? He asked. Home, Marcus, I said. The real one. As the car pulled away, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was happening in that dining room. The silence of the lambs before the slaughter. They had invited a wolf to dinner, hoping to tame it with table scraps, and they were only just realizing that the wolf had already eaten. I had my hand on the polished chrome handle of the SUV door, one foot already on the running board, ready to leave the Sterling estate and its inhabitants to rot in their own mediocrity. Marcus, my driver, was holding the door open, his body angled to block any interference. I had walked out of that dining room with the intention of silence. I wanted to leave them wondering, letting their own paranoia do the work. But Richard Sterling was a man who had never been told no without viewing it as a negotiation starter. You cannot simply walk away, Inez. Richard's voice bellowed from the portico. He had followed me out, flanked by Eleanor, Harper, and a breathless Todd. Liam trailed behind them, looking like a ghost haunting his own life. We are not finished. You are threatening the stability of this family, and I will not have it. If you think you can intimidate us with some corporate restructuring, you are sorely mistaken. I have friends in this town. I can make sure the narrative of your success is painted very differently in the press. I stopped. The cool night air suddenly felt electric. That was it. That was the trigger. He had threatened me. He had tried to use his old world leverage against my new world reality. I took my foot off the running board. I turned around slowly. Wait here, Marcus, I said. I walked back up the 3 marble steps to where the Sterling family stood, huddled under the amber light of the entryway. They looked like a Renaissance painting of sinners awaiting judgment. Richard puffed out his chest, thinking his threat had worked, thinking he had brought me back to the bargaining table. He was wrong. He had not brought me back to negotiate. He had brought me back to execute. "You want to talk about narratives, Richard?" I asked, my voice calm, cutting through the silence of the driveway. "Let us talk about facts, because unlike you, I do not deal in threats. I deal in data." I turned my gaze to Todd first. He was standing slightly behind Harper, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Todd," I said, "I was going to wait until Monday to have HR deliver the news, but since we are all here, we might as well be efficient." Todd swallowed hard. "News? What news?" "I finished my review of the personnel files for the logistics division while I was being driven over here." I lied. I had finished it 3 hours ago. But the timing was better now. "Your department has the lowest efficiency rating in the entire North American sector. You are bleeding money. In any other company, you would be fired for cause." Todd opened his mouth to protest, but I held up a finger. "However," I continued, "I know how important family is to you, so I'm not firing you. I am reassigning you." "Reassigning?" Todd looked hopeful. "To the downtown office." "No," I said, a small, cold smile touching my lips. "I am transferring you to our cold chain field operations unit. We have a facility that has been struggling with inventory management. It requires hands-on leadership, someone who is willing to get their hands dirty. It is in Nome, Alaska." "Alaska," Todd squeaked. The word came out high and thin. "It is a vital role, Todd," I said. "You will be managing the deep freeze storage for seafood exports. It is minus 20 degrees there right now. I hope you packed a warmer coat than that blazer. You start Monday. If you refuse the transfer, it will be considered a voluntary resignation, and you will lose your severance package and your unvested stock options, which, given your mortgage, I assume you cannot afford to do." Todd looked as if he were going to vomit. He grabbed Harper's arm for support, but Harper was too busy staring at me with hatred. "You are a monster," Harper spat. "Sending him to Alaska. He has a family. He has a life here. You are just doing this to be spiteful because you are jealous of us." "Jealous?" I laughed. It was a genuine sound of amusement. "Harper, I am not the one who has been stealing from a registered 501c3 charity for the last 4 years. The color drained from Harper's face so fast, it looked like a special effect. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. "The Sterling Hope Foundation," I said, reciting the name of the family's beloved charity. "You are the treasurer, are you not?" My due diligence team ran a routine vendor analysis on all entities associated with Axiom executives and their families. It is standard protocol for the SEC. Do you know what they found? I took a step closer to her. She reeked of fear and expensive perfume. "They found a recurring payment to a consulting firm called HS Designs," I said. $3,000 a month, every month, for event planning services, but HS Designs does not plan events. Does it, Harper? It is a shell company registered to your maiden name, and the bank account associated with it has a very interesting spending history. Neiman Marcus, Saks Fifth Avenue, the Four Seasons in Maui. Eleanor let out a gasp, turning to look at her daughter. "Harper, is this true?" "It was just a loan," Harper cried, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "I was going to pay it back. Liam needed help with his car payments, and Mom needed that surgery. And it is not a loan, Harper," I cut her off. "It is embezzlement. It is federal wire fraud. And I have the transaction logs downloaded on a secure server. I haven't sent them to the IRS yet. I was debating whether it was worth the paperwork. But since you called me a monster, I suppose I should live up to the title." Harper collapsed onto the stone bench by the door, burying her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. It wasn't the cry of a remorseful woman. It was the cry of a child who had been caught with her hand in the jar. Richard's face was purple. He was watching his family disintegrate in real time. He turned on me, his eyes bulging. "That is enough," he shouted. "You get off my property. You think you can come here and destroy my children? I will ruin you. Inez, I am the director of Sovereign Bank. Do you have any idea the influence I have?" "Sovereign Bank," I repeated, nodding slowly. "Yes, I know it well. In fact, Nexus Logic has been your branch's largest depositor for the last 2 years. We kept our operating capital there, about $40 million in liquid assets." Richard went still. "And," I continued, enjoying the look of dawning horror on his face, "the $180 million from the acquisition that was wired into my holding account at Sovereign this morning. Technically, Richard, I am your biggest client. I represent about 12% of your branch's total deposit base." I checked my watch. "Or, I was," I corrected myself. "My CFO scheduled a full withdrawal of all funds for Monday morning. We are moving our business to Chase, but more importantly, I just CC'd your regional director on the exit interview email." Richard swayed. He grabbed the doorframe to steady himself. He knew exactly what that meant. Losing the branch's biggest depositor due to a personal conflict of interest will trigger an immediate compliance audit. It would set off alarms at the corporate headquarters. He would be audited. He would be investigated. He would lose his bonus, his standing, and likely his job for failing to retain a key client. "You cannot do that," Richard whispered. "It will ruin the quarterly numbers. It will end my career." "Then perhaps you should have been nicer to the gold digger," I said. "Because it turns out, I was the gold mine, and I just closed the shaft." The silence on the porch was absolute. The only sound was the wind rustling the manicured hedges and Harper's muffled sobbing. They were not just defeated, they were dismantled. I had stripped them of their pride, their security, and their future, all without raising a hand. "Inez." Liam stepped forward. He looked from his weeping sister to his shell-shocked father, and then to me. His eyes were wide, pleading. "Inez, please," he said, reaching out a hand as if to touch me. "This is too much. You have made your point. Just stop. We can fix this. I can talk to Harper. I can—" "Shut up, Liam!" The scream came from Richard. He didn't even look at his son. He was staring at me with a look of pure, unadulterated terror. He knew that if Liam said one more stupid thing, I might decide to burn down the house itself. "Do not say another word," Eleanor hissed at her son, gripping Richard's arm. "She will kill us. She will actually kill us." Liam froze, his mouth half open. He looked at his parents, the people he had spent his entire life trying to please, the people whose approval he had valued over my love, and he saw the truth. They didn't care about him. They only cared about survival. And right now, survival meant obeying me. I looked at Liam one last time. "Listen to your father." "Liam," I said softly. "He finally understands who is in charge." I turned my back on them. I walked down the marble steps, my heels clicking a steady rhythm of victory. I got into the back of the SUV. Marcus closed the door, sealing me inside the quiet, leather-scented sanctuary. "We are clear to go, Ms. Calderon?" Marcus asked. "Yes, Marcus," I said, looking out the tinted window at the group of people frozen on the porch, illuminated by the harsh yellow light. They looked like statues in a graveyard. "Drive, and do not stop until we are back in the city." As the car accelerated down the driveway, leaving the Sterling estate in the dust, I felt a knot in my chest loosen. It wasn't happiness, exactly. It was something cleaner. It was the feeling of a balance sheet finally, perfectly, zeroing out. The debt was paid, the account was closed, and I was richer than I had ever been. Before the heavy door of the armored SUV could close, sealing me away from the wreckage of the Sterling family, I paused. My hand was gripping the leather armrest, but my other hand, the left one, felt suddenly, unbearably heavy. It was a weight that had nothing to do with gravity and everything to do with the lie I had been wearing on my fourth finger for 11 months. I stepped back out of the car. Marcus, my driver, looked concerned, ready to intervene, but I signaled him to wait. I walked back toward the bottom of the porch steps. The family was still there, frozen in their tableau of misery. But Liam had moved. He had stumbled down the first 2 steps, his eyes red, his face a mask of absolute desperation. He looked like a man watching the last lifeboat leave the sinking Titanic. I looked down at my hand. The engagement ring glinted in the harsh amber light of the portico. It was a solitaire, modest but tasteful, or so I had thought. When Liam proposed, he had told me it was a vintage diamond, an heirloom from his grandmother's side, reset in white gold. He had spun a story about how he had to fight his mother to give it to me, a story that had made me cry tears of gratitude for his bravery. But as I looked at it now, with the eyes of a woman who had just negotiated a 9-figure deal, I saw it for what it truly was. It was dull. It lacked the fire of a true carbon structure. It was a cubic zirconia, likely purchased for $200 at a mall kiosk. The heirloom story was just like the protective family story, a fabrication designed to keep me grateful for scraps. I reached up and slid the ring off my finger. It came off easily, as if my body was repelling it. There was a small, wrought iron table sitting next to the stone bench where Harper was still weeping. I walked over to it. The metal clinked softly as I placed the ring on the glass surface. It looked small and pathetic sitting there, stripped of its sentimental value. "Inez," Liam choked out. He scrambled down the remaining steps, nearly tripping over his own feet. "What are you doing? Please, do not do this. There is no wedding." "Liam," I said, my voice quiet but carrying clearly in the night air. "I am canceling the venue in the morning. I will cover the cancellation fees. Consider it my final gift to you." "No," Liam shouted, the sound raw and broken, to my shock, and to the horror of his parents standing behind him. He dropped to his knees right there on the gravel driveway. The gravel crunched under his suit trousers. He reached out, grabbing the hem of my blazer with trembling hands. "You cannot leave me," he sobbed, tears streaming down his face. "Inez, listen to me. I do not care about the money. I swear on my life, I do not care about the $180 million. I loved you when you were broke. I loved you when we were eating takeout on the floor. That was real. We were real." I looked down at him, a year ago. This sight would have broken me. I would have dropped to my knees beside him, held his face, and promised him that we could fix anything. But tonight, I felt nothing but a distant, hollow pity. It was like watching a stranger cry over a lost lottery ticket. "Stand up, Liam," I said. "You are ruining your suit. Tell me you believe me," he begged, tightening his grip on my jacket. "Tell me you know I love you." I gently pried his fingers off my clothes. I stepped back, creating a distance he could not bridge. "I think you believe you love me," I said, looking him in the eye. "But you do not love me, Liam. You love the idea of yourself as a savior. You loved me because I was a project. I was broken enough to make you feel strong, but safe enough not to threaten your fragile ego. You loved having someone to protect because it distracted you from the fact that you are too cowardly to stand up to your own father." "That is not true," he whispered, shaking his head. "It is true," I continued, my voice steady. "Because the moment I became strong, the moment I became your equal, or God forbid, your superior, your love turned into resentment. You didn't defend me tonight because you were afraid of your family. You didn't defend me because a part of you agreed with them. You wanted me to take that receptionist job. You wanted me to be small so you could stay big." I looked over his shoulder at Richard and Eleanor, who were watching their son beg with looks of disgust. They were not disgusted by his pain. They were disgusted by his weakness. "I need a partner, Liam," I said, feeling a sudden, rushing sense of clarity. "I need someone who walks beside me, not someone who stands on my shoulders to appear taller. And I certainly do not need a charity project." "I can change," Liam pleaded. "I can be that man." "No," I said softly. "You can't. Not here. Not in this house." I turned away from him. "Goodbye, Liam. I walked back to the car. My footsteps on the gravel sounded loud and rhythmic, a steady beat of departure. I did not look back at the ring on the table. I did not look back at the man kneeling in the dirt. I did not look back at the mansion that had loomed over my life like a fortress of judgment for 2 years. I stepped into the SUV and pulled the heavy door shut. The lock engaged with a solid, satisfying thud, sealing out the weeping, the shouting, and the suffocating expectations of the Sterling dynasty. "Go," I said to Marcus. The engine purred to life, a beast waking up. As we rolled down the long driveway, the lights of the mansion faded into the rearview mirror, shrinking until they were nothing more than distant, yellow pinpricks in the darkness. We reached the main gates at the bottom of the hill. I expected silence. Instead, I was met with a chaotic explosion of light. The press had found me. There must have been 20 of them. Photographers, news vans, freelance paparazzi who had tracked the new tech billionaire to her fiancé's address. They swarmed the gate, their camera lenses pressing against the iron bars like hungry eyes. Flashbulbs popped in a blinding stroboscopic rhythm, illuminating the night. "Ms. Calderon, Ms. Calderon, is it true you dumped him?" "Inez, look this way." "What is your next move, Inez?" Marcus slowed the car, navigating carefully through the sea of reporters. "Do you want me to call the police to clear them?" Marcus asked, eyeing the crowd warily. I looked out the window. Through the tinted glass, they could not see me, but I could see them. I saw the hunger in their faces, the obsession with the narrative. Yesterday, I was invisible. Today, I was the story. "No," I said. "Just keep driving." I pressed the button on the door, and the black privacy screen slid up, covering the window completely. I blocked them out. I blocked out the flashbulbs, the questions, the noise. I leaned back into the leather seat and closed my eyes. For the first time in 5 years, my mind was quiet. There was no code running in my head. There was no anxiety about server costs. There was no agonizing over whether I was wearing the right dress for Eleanor Sterling. There was only the hum of the engine and the vast, open road ahead. I was alone in the back of the car. But I did not feel lonely. I felt light. I felt untethered. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I deleted the Sterling wedding planning folder. I deleted the Sterling family group chat. Then, I opened my contacts and found Liam's number. I hovered my thumb over the name for a fraction of a second, a heartbeat of memory for the man I thought he was, and then I pressed delete. The contact vanished. "Marcus," I said, opening my eyes. "Yes, ma'am." "Take the scenic route back to the city. I want to see the skyline." "You got it." I looked forward, through the windshield, watching the road unfold under the headlights. The city was waiting for me. My company was waiting for me. My life, the real one, the one I had built with my own hands and my own mind, was finally beginning. And the best part was, I didn't owe a single cent of it to anyone. 3 months had passed since the night I walked away from the Sterling estate, leaving my engagement ring on a garden table. Chicago had turned from a humid summer city into a fortress of gray ice and biting wind. The seasons had changed, and so had the balance of power in my life. I assumed that silence would be the end of it. I assumed that the shame of their exposure would force the Sterlings into a quiet retreat. I underestimated the audacity of desperate people. It started with a lawsuit. Todd, currently stationed in the frozen purgatory of Nome, Alaska, filed a civil suit against Axiom and me personally for constructive dismissal and workplace harassment. He claimed I had targeted him with impossible quotas and malicious reassignment to force him out. He wanted $5 million in damages. Simultaneously, Harper launched her offensive. She took to social media, leveraging her small but wealthy following to paint a narrative of victimhood. She posted a 10-minute video titled, "The Truth About the Tech Bully." In it, she sat in her designer living room, wearing no makeup to appear vulnerable, and wept about how I had infiltrated their loving family, used them for connections, and then ruthlessly discarded them once I got my payday. She claimed I was gaslighting them. She claimed I was a predator who had broken her brother's heart for sport. The video went viral in their social circle. The comments were filled with sympathy from other trust fund socialites who viewed new money like me as a dangerous infection. I did not respond on Twitter. I did not issue a press release denying the allegations. I knew that in the court of public opinion, a defensive billionaire looks guilty, but a benevolent philanthropist looks untouchable. On a Tuesday morning in November, I stood on a stage in the atrium of the newly renovated Nexus Axiom headquarters. The room was packed with press, industry leaders, and aspiring entrepreneurs. Behind me was a massive screen displaying a new logo, a shield interwoven with a circuit board. "Welcome," I said into the microphone. My voice was steady, amplified to fill the cavernous space. For years, I built my company in the shadows because I did not fit the profile of what a CEO was supposed to look like. I was told I was too young, too female, too ethnic. I was told by people very close to me that my ambition was a delusion. I paused, letting the words land. Today, I am launching the Startup Shield. It is a venture capital fund and legal defense initiative specifically for founders who face systemic bias and familial sabotage. We are starting with an endowment of $50 million. Applause erupted. It was a wave of sound that washed away the petty accusations Harper had been spewing on Instagram. I opened the floor for questions. I knew it was coming. I had planted the seed. A reporter from the Chicago Tribune stood up. "Ms. Calderon, this is a noble initiative, but how do you respond to the recent allegations from the Sterling family? They claim you are the one who does the sabotaging. Harper Sterling calls you a destroyer of families." The room went quiet. This was the drama they really wanted. "I am glad you asked," I said, my expression remaining perfectly pleasant. "I believe transparency is the best disinfectant. Harper Sterling claims I used her family. She claims I was a burden they tried to support. Rather than argue with her interpretation of events, I think it is better to let them speak for themselves." I clicked a button on the remote in my hand. The massive screen behind me shifted. The logo disappeared, replaced by grainy but high-definition footage. It was a security recording from inside my old apartment, the small, cramped one I lived in before the buyout. The date stamp was from 6 months ago. It was the day I had given Liam a spare key, thinking it was a romantic gesture. On the screen, Liam and Harper walked into my living room. I was not there. They thought they were alone. The audio was crystal clear. Harper: "God, this place is depressing. It smells like cheap soup." Liam: "It is temporary. Once we are married, she will move into the estate. We can sublet this dump." Harper: "Sublet it." "Don't be stupid." Liam: "Keep the lease. I need a place to store my winter wardrobe. My closet is overflowing. This place is cheaper than a storage unit. We can just tell Inez it is an investment property or something. She will believe anything you say." Liam: "You want to use my wife's apartment as a closet." Harper: "Why not? It is not like she is paying for it. You said you pay for everything anyway. Right? She is just a leech." Liam: "At least make her useful. Once you control her accounts, we can turn this into a proper storage space. Just get rid of her ugly furniture." Liam: "Yeah, you are right. I will talk to her about upgrading her living situation next week. She is so desperate to please me. She will probably thank me for kicking her out." The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the atrium was absolute. It was a shocked, heavy silence. I looked out at the crowd. "That," I said, my voice cutting through the quiet like a blade, "is the loving family I allegedly destroyed. They plotted to turn my home into a closet because they viewed me as nothing more than an accessory to be managed. I did not destroy the Sterlings. I simply stopped letting them use me as storage." I walked off the stage. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The internet, which had been lukewarm toward Harper's tears, turned into a pack of wolves. The clip was shared millions of times within hours. The hashtag storage unit was trending globally, a mocking tribute to Harper's entitlement. Harper shut down her social media accounts by noon. The boutique brands she partnered with dropped her before sunset. She was not just embarrassed, she was pariah. The old money set, she desperate tried to impress, could forgive cruelty, but they could not forgive being caught on tape looking trashy. Todd dropped his lawsuit the next day. His lawyer likely told him that continuing a legal battle against a woman who had video evidence of the family's conspiracy was financial suicide. He remained in Alaska, quietly resigning 2 weeks later to avoid the humiliation of being fired for cause, and Liam, the law firm where he worked, was prestigious. They valued discretion and image above all else. A viral video of an associate conspiring to financially abuse his fiancé was not the kind of image they wanted. I heard through the grapevine that he was fired on a Friday afternoon. Security escorted him out of the building, carrying a single cardboard box. It was a poetic parallel to the fate he had planned for me. A month later, I stood in my new office on the 80th floor. It was late, past 9 in the evening, but the office was bustling. We were preparing for the global rollout of the new logistics protocol. The energy was vibrant. My team, David, Sarah, and the engineers who had stuck with me through the garage days were gathered around a holographic table, debating code structures and eating pizza. This was my reality. No pretension, no gold-rimmed plates, just brilliance and hard work. I walked over to the window. Chicago lay spread out beneath me, a grid of amber and white lights. I felt a profound sense of peace. I was not looking down on the city with arrogance. I was looking at it with gratitude. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text from a number I did not have saved, but I knew exactly who it was. Known number. I saw the news about the startup Shield. It is amazing. Inez, I am watching everything you do, and I am just so sorry. I regret everything. I regret losing you every single second of the day. Can we please just meet for coffee 10 minutes? I just want to apologize to your face. I stared at the message. I regret it. Of course he did. He regretted the loss of status. He regretted the loss of the money. He regretted that he was now a joke in the legal community while I was a titan of industry, but he did not regret hurting me. He regretted the consequences of hurting me. I did not feel an urge to reply. I did not feel the need to send a stinging comeback. I had already won. Responding would only acknowledge that he still existed in my world. "Hey, Inez," David called out from the table. "We are ready to sign off on the Tokyo integration. We just need your key." I looked up at my team. They were smiling, waiting for me. That was my future. "Coming?" I said. I looked down at the phone one last time. I went into the settings. I selected change number. I confirmed the action. The network bars cycled, disconnected for a second, and then reconnected with a fresh, clean signal. The message from Liam disappeared into the digital void, severed along with the last thread of the life I used to tolerate. I walked back to the table, tossing the phone onto the couch. I picked up the digital stylus. "Let us launch this thing," I said. I signed my name on the interface. Inez Calderon. The screen flashed green. The upload began. I didn't look back at the window. I didn't think about the Sterlings. They were just ghosts now, fading into the static of history, while I was busy building the future. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal and sweet redemption. I am curious to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a busy city like Chicago, or perhaps somewhere quiet and snowy? Please comment your location below so we can connect. If you enjoyed seeing Inez take back her power, please make sure to subscribe to Daisy Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people who need a little inspiration. See you in the next chapter.